Hello everyone and welcome to Wormwood Tales. Relax and enjoy the story for sleep video. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Let's begin. The dim lights of the subway station flickered sporadically, casting an eerie glow over the empty platform. The faint rumble of the approaching train echoed through the cavernous space, blending with the occasional drip of water from the aged infrastructure above. Sarah, a weary college student, stood alone, her breath visible in the cool night air as she wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck. She glanced at her phone. 11:57 p.m. The late-night study session had stretched longer than expected, and now the weight of her heavy backpack pressed down on her, a constant reminder of the homework left undone. As she waited, the air grew still, amplifying the sounds around her. A low rumble reverberated through the ground as the train approached, its headlights piercing the darkness like a beacon of safety. Sarah felt a mix of relief and unease. She was grateful for the ride home but apprehensive about being alone in the station so late at night. The platform, usually bustling with life, was deserted, the shadows stretching long across the tiled floor, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The train screeched to a halt, the doors sliding open with a soft hiss. She stepped aboard, sinking into a seat near the window, grateful for the momentary solitude. The familiar scent of metal and old upholstery surrounded her, a comforting embrace amidst the night's unease. With her eyes growing heavy, Sarah closed them for just a moment, hoping to steal a few seconds of rest before her stop. But the moment was fleeting. As the train jerked into motion, a soft, plaintive cry cut through the comforting hum of the train's engine. Sarah's eyes flew open, her heart racing. At first, she thought it was the sound of the train itself, but as the cry echoed again, clearer and more distinct, she felt a chill grip her spine. It was unmistakably the voice of a child, calling out for help. She glanced around at the other passengers, but they were engrossed in their phones or lost in their thoughts, seemingly unaware of the chilling sound that reverberated through the car. The cries grew more desperate, each echo tugging at her heart. Panic rose in her chest. Was she imagining it? Maybe it was a trick of her tired mind, but as the train sped through the dark tunnels, the cries continued louder and more insistent. Sarah shifted in her seat, her unease morphing into a burning curiosity. The sound was hauntingly familiar, an echo from somewhere deep within her own childhood memories. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was in real danger. The rhythmic clattering of the train's wheels against the tracks provided a monotonous backdrop, but the eerie cries persisted, cutting through the mechanical sounds like a knife. Sarah's heart raced as she leaned forward, straining to listen. Each wail seemed to resonate from the very depths of the subway, weaving a thread of terror that wrapped tightly around her chest. Was it truly the voice of a child? The sound was both haunting and heartbreaking, echoing with a sense of urgency that she couldn't ignore. She glanced around the train car again, searching for signs of recognition among the other passengers. A few were scrolling through their phones, completely oblivious to the chilling cries that filled the air. One man, seated near the door, wore headphones, his eyes closed as if he were blissfully unaware of the world outside. A woman across the aisle was reading a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. The contrast between their indifference and her mounting anxiety only heightened her sense of isolation. Why was no one else reacting? As the train sped through the dark tunnels, the cries seemed to grow louder, echoing in the confined space like a siren song. Panic fluttered in Sarah's stomach. She felt an inexplicable urge to understand the source of the sound. It was as if the cries were calling to her, pulling her into a mystery she couldn't quite comprehend. Each shriek was tinged with fear and desperation, a plea for help that reverberated deep within her soul. "Help me," the voice seemed to say, a phrase she could almost hear clearly amid the chaos of sound. Shaking off her fear, Sarah clutched her backpack tightly and took a deep breath. She had to investigate. The train slowed as it approached the next station, and Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. The moment the doors opened, she stood up and stepped out onto the platform. The cries faded slightly, replaced by the soft whoosh of the train departing, but the echo still lingered in her ears, urging her to act. The platform was nearly deserted, illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed ominously overhead. Sarah could feel the cool breeze that swept through the station, sending a shiver down her spine. She took a cautious step forward, her eyes scanning the dim corners of the platform. The cries had vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence that felt almost suffocating. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the voice was still there, lingering in the shadows. Her instincts kicked in. She felt compelled to explore the station further, to uncover the truth behind the haunting sound that had invaded her thoughts. She noticed a narrow corridor leading to a darkened area, marked by a faded sign that read "Service Tunnel Authorized Personnel Only." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, a warning against the darkness that lay ahead, but curiosity gnawed at her. What if the voice belonged to a child in trouble? As if spurred by an invisible force, she took a deep breath and stepped into the corridor, the sound of her footsteps echoing off the damp walls. With each step deeper into the darkness, the whispers in her mind grew louder, urging her to find the source of the echoing cries. Unable to ignore the chilling sound any longer, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the train approached the last stop. The cry echoed in her mind, persistent and haunting. Each thud of the train's wheels seemed to synchronize with the desperate pleas of the unseen child. She glanced around, searching for anyone who might share in her concern, but the other passengers remained oblivious, wrapped in their own worlds. When the train came to a halt with a resounding jolt, Sarah made her decision. She could not simply ride home and forget about the cries. A gnawing sense of responsibility pulled her toward the darkness. With a deep breath, she rose from her seat and stepped off the train, her shoes clicking against the cold, damp tiles of the deserted platform. The station was shrouded in darkness, the only illumination coming from flickering overhead lights that cast elongated shadows across the floor. An unsettling silence enveloped her, amplifying the echoes of her footsteps. The air felt thick, charged with an unspoken tension that prickled at her skin. Sarah moved toward the tunnel that led away from the platform, her instincts guiding her as she followed the sound that called out like a siren's song. As she ventured deeper into the tunnel, the cries grew louder, weaving in and out of the echoing walls. She pulled out her phone, the screen illuminating her face with a faint glow. The light barely pierced the shadows, but it was enough to guide her through the winding passage. With each step, she felt a mix of fear and determination. She had to find the source of those cries. The tunnel was a labyrinth of pipes and old infrastructure, remnants of a subway system that had long since fallen into disrepair. Sarah paused to listen, the cries reverberating through the air like a haunting melody. They were clearer now, a child's voice tinged with desperation. "Help me," it pleaded, echoing off the damp concrete walls, and her heart twisted at the sound. As she continued forward, Sarah's breath quickened, her pulse racing with the urgency of the situation. She knew she was alone, but the cries were enough to push her through the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Thoughts of missing children flashed through her mind, the stories she had heard, the reports she had read. Was it possible that she had stumbled upon something sinister, something that had been hidden from the world? The tunnel narrowed, and the walls seemed to close in around her, adding to her sense of claustrophobia. Shadows danced just out of her line of sight, and the air grew heavy with an inexplicable energy. Then, just as she rounded a corner, she came upon a small, rusted door that looked as if it had been forgotten by time. The cries were louder now, a frantic urgency pulsing in the air. With trembling hands, Sarah pushed the door open, its hinges creaking ominously. Inside, the dim light revealed an old maintenance area, littered with rusted tools and forgotten remnants of a bygone era. In the corner, something moved, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she took a cautious step forward. The cries were now frantic, wrapping around her like a cold embrace, urging her to act. As Sarah stood in the abandoned maintenance area, the atmosphere around her thickened, a palpable tension hanging in the air. The cries had ceased momentarily, replaced by a suffocating silence that made her heart pound in her ears. The flickering light bulbs overhead cast elongated shadows that danced menacingly on the walls, creating the illusion of movement in the corners of her vision. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing as she focused on the small figure in the corner. "Help me," the girl whimpered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of Sarah's heart. Lily, with her disheveled hair and tear-streaked cheeks, looked as if she had stepped out of a nightmare. Her big, innocent eyes were filled with fear, a mirror to Sarah's own rising panic. "Who are you?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice trembling as she knelt down to the girl's level. "What happened to you?" "I'm Lily," she replied, her tiny hands clenched into fists. "I've been here for so long. I just want to go home." The vulnerability in her voice tugged at Sarah's heart, igniting a fierce determination within her. But even as she felt an overwhelming urge to comfort the child, an instinctive fear gnawed at her gut. Just then, the echoes began to swell once more, swirling around them like a tempest. The cries returned, now mingled with panicked whispers and desperate pleas from unseen voices. "Help us! Help us!" they chorused, each echo sharper than the last, creating a cacophony of terror that felt almost alive. The walls of the tunnel seemed to close in, shadows flickering like ghosts, and Sarah could feel the weight of countless lost souls pressing down on her. She glanced around, half expecting to see faces emerging from the darkness, but all she saw were the remnants of a forgotten world, rusted tools, broken equipment, and debris scattered about like remnants of a long-lost battle. "Why can't you leave?" Sarah asked Lily, her voice shaking as she fought to maintain her composure. "They won't let me," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "They want me to stay here, and I can't find my way back. You have to help me." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The shadows danced closer, and she could sense a dark presence lurking just beyond the edges of her vision. The whispers grew louder, almost accusatory, as if they were blaming her for intruding upon their realm. "Leave. Go back," they screamed, the voices echoing in a haunting chorus. Feeling the suffocating weight of fear, Sarah took a step back, glancing at the tunnel entrance. The echoes morphed into a desperate wail, almost pleading, and she realized that the shadows were not just a figment of her imagination. They were the lost souls of the children who had vanished in this very subway, trapped in a cycle of despair. "I can't leave you here," Sarah exclaimed, stepping toward Lily with renewed resolve. "I won't abandon you." She reached out, her hand trembling as she extended it toward the girl. The shadows seemed to writhe in response, dark tendrils stretching out as if trying to pull her back into the darkness. As her fingers brushed against Lily's, a surge of energy coursed through her, igniting a connection that felt both terrifying and empowering. In that moment, Sarah realized she could break the cycle. "I will help you find peace," she vowed, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Just then, the lights flickered violently, and the shadows coalesced into a dark mass that surged toward them, a tempest of rage and sorrow. "No. You cannot take her," Sarah screamed, feeling the force of the lost souls trying to drag them into the abyss. The echoing cries grew frantic, and in that moment, she felt a fierce resolve rise within her. "I won't let you keep her," she shouted, determination hardening her resolve. With all her strength, she pulled Lily closer, their hands entwined, and shouted into the darkness, "We're leaving together." As their combined energy surged outward, the shadows recoiled, and the cries transformed into a chorus of release. The air shimmered with light as the tunnel began to fade away, and for the first time, Sarah felt the oppressive weight lift. In a blinding flash, the darkness shattered, and Sarah found herself standing back on the subway platform, the echoes of the cries fading into silence. The train's doors closed behind her, and the lights of the station flickered back to life. She turned around, heart racing, but there was no sign of Lily, only the distant sound of the train departing.